Keanu Reeves arrived in Dubai under a veil of quiet intention, the way a comet arrives in the night sky. Without announcement, yet impossible to ignore, his plane touched down
ready
just
to
before
vibrate
sunrise.
with daylight.
This was no standard press tour, no whirlwind of staged interviews. He had come for a film wrapped so tightly in secrecy that even its working title shifted week by week. Rumors had leaked like shimmering heat from desert dunes. The project would intertwine ancient desert legends with futuristic cyber architecture, fusing myth and megastructure into something neither past nor future, but a strange duet of both. Some said the script whispered about a forgotten civilization beneath the sands, one that had woven stories into stone and light. Others believed it would be a neon-drenched epic framed by Dubai's evolving skyline, where glass towers seemed to rehearse for spaceflight. No one agreed on the details, but everyone agreed on this. Whatever Keanu Reeves touched tended to ignite the collective imagination. As he stepped out onto the tarmac, the air carried the soft mineral scent of dawn. He moved with that familiar grounded calm, as if his thoughts kept time with the Earth's rotation. A private terminal doorway opened, and something curious began to happen. In the distance, fans gathered behind railings, blinking sleep from their eyes, their excitement crackling like constellations waking up. Some had been waiting since midnight, wrapped in hoodies and hope. When they saw him, their energy swept forward in a wave, not loud or chaotic, but luminous. Keanu lifted a small hand in greeting, a gesture that landed with the weight of sincerity. Cameras fluttered. A few fans whispered to each other as if he were a rare phenomenon that shouldn't be startled. Even from afar, his presence felt oddly tranquil, like a lighthouse in the middle of a city. The city welcomed him with grandeur. A convoy glided through morning streets polished by streetlights. Dubai itself seemed to stretch and unfurl before him, the Burj Khalifa shimmering like a celestial spear, distant cranes arranging new patterns in the skyline, and the desert just beyond the pavement, waiting with ancient patience. It was easy to imagine that something old lived out there listening. His hotel room hadn't been chosen for comfort alone. From the balcony, he could see both the glittering city and the open dunes, two worlds that rarely shared a frame. The director had hinted that this view was essential for Keanu's understanding of the story, a story where the boundary between the modern and the mythical thinned, like silk under flame. Keanu set down his bag and walked to the glass railing. The sun had begun rising, brushing gold along the edges of the city. For the first time since he read the script's fragmented pages, he felt a stirring, something like curiosity. Dubai greeted Keanu Reeves with an architecture of audacity. The morning sun rose behind the skyline, and the glass towers responded with a kind of choreography. Each surface gathered the new light and sent it ricocheting upward, as though the city were practicing a private ritual of illumination. The reflections stitched together a tapestry of gold and pale blue that made the entire horizon shimmer. With quiet ambition, these towers didn't simply occupy space. They announced themselves with a certainty that bordered on myth. Keanu watched them from the window of the car as it glided along the boulevard. The buildings felt alive, their surfaces breathing in the first warmth of the day. Some rose in smooth spirals, others in precise geometric patterns, and a few seemed to be reaching toward the sky in sheer curiosity, as if wondering what lay above the clouds they intended to meet. The city carried a sense of momentum, an energy that tasted like possibility. It reminded him of a place in the story he had come to tell, where innovation grew out of ancient foundations and light served as both symbol and structure. When the car curved toward the celestial arc, Keanu leaned forward slightly, drawn by its presence. The hotel stood apart not by height but by design, its edges softened upward in graceful curves, each level stacked with the delicate confidence of a hanging garden in the sky. The building did not dominate the skyline, it elevated it. Sunlight clung to the building's white gold exterior, glimmering as though the structure absorbed daylight for later use. The entrance canopy hovered with improbable lightness, giving the impression that the entire hotel might lift off the ground if the wind decided to encourage it. Inside, the lobby expanded into a vast chamber of suspended light. Columns rose like enormous beams of crystallized moonglow, guiding guests toward a central atrium where a floating sculpture spiraled slowly in the air. Its movement remained subtle, as if obeying a rhythm only Dubai's horizon understood. The floor reflected everything above it, carrying a polished clarity that made visitors feel as if they were walking along the surface of a still lake. Somewhere in the distance, a harp-like tone chimed, soft and warm. Keanu moved through the space quietly, absorbing its layered textures. The celestial arc didn't strive for opulence. It achieved a kind of architectural serenity. Every corner offered a moment of calm. Every line seemed carefully coaxed rather than forced. The hotel's designers had created something that felt elevated by imagination, rather than steel. When he reached his suite, the door opened to a view that stopped him mid-step. The room flowed outward into a balcony that appeared to float above the city. Below it, roads curved like luminous veins, guiding life through the desert. Beyond the towers, the dunes stretched out in gentle slopes, glowing under the growing light. The hotel balanced between these worlds. Keanu Reeves felt the first night in Dubai settling around him like a velvet curtain. The day's brightness had softened into strands of amber and deep indigo that twined across the skyline. His suite in the celestial arc held a quiet hum, the kind that existed only in buildings engineered to feel almost alive. He had spent the evening reading over fragments of the script, pacing occasionally to the balcony where wind lifted the edges of the desert and scattered them into the night. When he finally stepped away from the view, something unusual caught his attention. A faint sound, barely a whisper, a subtle shift of air near the door. Not a knock, not footsteps, just a tiny interruption in an otherwise immaculate silence. He opened the door and saw nothing but the soft-lit hallway stretching in both directions. No movement, no voices. And yet, lying angled at the base of the door was an envelope the color of tarnished silver, unmarked, untouched. A strange chill passed through the air when he reached for it. Back inside the suite, the envelope seemed heavier than it looked, as though it carried a story that had been waiting for someone specific. Keanu sat on the low table near the panoramic window, the city glittering behind him like a constellation paused mid-breath. He tore the envelope open with a slow, deliberate motion. A small metallic shard slid into his palm. It wasn't a simple piece of metal. The surface bore etched lines, no, coordinates, engraved with elegant precision. The shard fit naturally against his hand, warm despite having no reason to be. When he tilted it toward the city lights, the markings glimmered with a quiet intelligence, hinting at geometry older than skyscrapers and stories older than maps. He traced the coordinates with his thumb. They pointed far beyond Dubai, past the edge of the well-trod dunes, past the familiar tourist routes, into an area of the desert rarely discussed and almost never visited. The sort of place where sand buried secrets as quickly as the wind uncovered them. Keanu set the shard on the table. Something shifted in the air again, not a sound, but a feeling, as though the room itself exhaled. He looked back toward the door, half expecting another envelope to appear, but the hallway remained still. He replayed the moment. He had heard no footsteps, no elevator, nothing that explained how someone had approached and vanished so flawlessly. The Celestial Arc wasn't the kind of hotel where one simply wandered unobserved, especially near a celebrity's suite. Security systems were discreet but thorough. Whoever delivered the shard had bypassed all of it with the ease of someone who understood the building better than its architects. He picked up the shard again. Its weight steadied him, pulling his focus toward the unknown desert. Beneath the markings, he sensed intention. Not malicious, but urgent. Keanu walked to the balcony once more. The city pulsed with quiet electricity. The desert beyond lay dark. The next morning, the Celestial Arc carried an unusual tension beneath its polished serenity. Hotels often held secrets, but this one specialized in quiet, sound-dampened hallways, velvet-toned lighting, staff gliding with nearly ceremonial smoothness. Yet something in the air felt unsettled, like a hidden chord vibrating under the lobby's tranquil melody. Keanu sensed it even before he reached the elevator. A pair of receptionists stood behind the marble counter, their conversation clipped short the moment they saw him. Their smiles were warm, professional, but their eyes darted, just for a breath, toward the cluster of elevators as if expecting them to whisper back. He pressed the call button. The chrome doors reflected him in fragmented silver. Near the concierge desk, a bellhop and a housekeeping supervisor exchanged a glance that lingered one beat too long. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like the quiet alertness of people who had heard something strange and hadn't decided whether to believe it. By the time the elevator chimed open, curiosity trailed Keanu like a soft shadow. He stepped inside. 2 floors down, the elevator paused for hotel staff. They entered briskly, one carrying fresh linens, another balancing a tray of porcelain cups, but their conversation was hushed, their glances once again drifting to him before flicking away. Keanu offered a polite nod. Their returned smiles trembled at the edges. When he reached the lobby, the atmosphere felt charged in that almost electric way that precedes a sandstorm. Guests sipped coffee beneath the hanging gardens, unaware, while the staff moved with unusually brisk efficiency. He approached the concierge to ask about transport into the desert, an innocuous request, though his purpose remained quiet, but the concierge's expression tightened, then immediately softened into hospitality. "Of course, Mr. Reeves," the concierge said, though his tone carried a faint tremor. "We can arrange whatever you need." Keanu thanked him and stepped aside, pretending not to notice the way the man's gaze traced the elevators again before returning to the reservation system. Only after Keanu moved toward the lounge did he hear a fragment of whispered conversation behind him, carried on the polished air like a secret feather. "He didn't check in, but he's on the cameras. Asked for the floor plan. Said he was a consultant. No name. No reservation. Security can't track his badge." Keanu paused, adjusting the cuff of his shirt, giving the impression of someone simply smoothing fabric rather than listening. The whispers continued. "And he wanted to know which room Mr. Reeves is staying in." The sentence hung in the air like a chord unresolved. Keanu lifted his gaze slightly, letting the lobby unfold before him. People moved normally. Quiet breakfast chatter, the soft hiss of the espresso machine, the gentle rustle of newspapers. But beneath it all ran a current of unease. Dawn unfurled across the horizon with a slow, molten grace, turning the dunes into a shifting sea of gold. Keanu stood at the edge of the desert, beside a production security guide named Dawood, a steady-eyed man who had spent 2 decades navigating the places tourists never saw. Their vehicle idled behind them, rumbling softly like a creature reluctant to cross into ancient territory. The coordinates from the metallic shard glimmered faintly on Keanu's phone, an exact point far beyond any marked route, deeper than the usual filming locations and farther than most locals cared to travel. Dawood glanced at the map, then at the rising sun. "You're sure about this?" he asked, not out of doubt but respect. "That region isn't hostile, just quiet in ways people don't expect." Keanu slipped the shard into his pocket. "Quiet's fine," he replied gently. "Something wants us out there." Dawood nodded once, as if recognizing the tone of a man who had become accustomed to unusual calls. They climbed into the off-road vehicle and rolled forward, tires biting into the sand. As Dubai receded behind them, the city's glass towers shrank into delicate monuments of light. Ahead stretched a world shaped entirely by wind and time. The desert transformed under the growing daylight. Ripples of sand glowed like the surface of a vast golden ocean, its dunes rising and folding into each other in silent, hypnotic waves. Every so often, the vehicle climbed a crest that revealed miles of shimmering emptiness. The air tasted clean, threaded with heat and the faint mineral whisper of ancient stone. Keanu watched the horizon, alert, yet calm. Something about the silence felt charged, as if the dunes carried a pulse. Not a sound exactly, but a vibration threading through the earth, reaching toward him with patient curiosity. Dawood seemed to sense it as well. "Hear that?" he murmured, slowing the car. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment. The hum was subtle, more felt than heard, like a low resonance beneath the sand. It reminded him of the distant hum of power stations or the tremor of a storm still forming far from sight. But this felt older, intentional. They stepped out of the vehicle. The early sun cast their shadows long across the dunes, stretching into the golden void. Keanu crouched and pressed a palm to the sand. A faint vibration tingled against his skin, rhythmic and steady, almost like a heartbeat muffled by centuries. "Not natural," Dawood said quietly. "I've crossed these dunes dozens of times. This is new." Keanu retrieved the shard from his pocket. The engraved coordinates seemed to react, glowing with a thin, pearlescent shimmer, as if recognizing its arrival in the right place. The hum beneath the dunes strengthened, rising from a whisper to a soft, steady cadence. The desert wind kicked up, swirling sand around their feet. The landscape ahead shifted, revealing a faint outline, something angular breaking the natural curves of the dunes. The shape emerged gradually, its form teased from the dunes by the early light. At first, Keanu thought the desert was playing one of its ancient tricks, reshaping shadows into false geometry. Yet as he and Dawood approached, the outline sharpened into certainty. An object rose from the sand, its architecture too intentional to be natural, too elegant to belong to anything abandoned by modern hands. The tower stood half swallowed by the dunes, its exposed surface catching the morning glow with a quiet pulse. The light did not flash or flicker, it breathed, steady and unhurried, as though the structure possessed a slumbering awareness of the world around it. Each luminous wave traveled across its metallic stone exterior with serene rhythm, tinting the sand with shades of pale gold and muted silver. Keanu stepped closer. The air around the tower held a subtle vibration, similar to the hum that had guided them here. It threaded through the space, brushing against his skin in soft pulses. Dawood approached more cautiously, boots sinking into the sand with each step. The base of the structure curved upward in a graceful ascent, suggesting a design philosophy that blended precision with reverence. The material was neither stone nor metal, yet seemed born from both. It carried a weathered texture, though it remained uncorroded by time. Even the dunes treated it gently, as if unwilling to bury it completely. Keanu raised a hand and traced the surface without making contact. Patterns covered the tower. Intricate symbols spiraled across the exterior in disciplined rows, each mark carved with deliberate artistry. The sight stirred something deep in his memory. He had seen these shapes before, not in life, but in the concept illustrations sent by the film's art director, sketches meant to decorate the ruins in the fictional story. He crouched to examine a cluster of symbols near the lower curve of the tower. The resemblance to the film's designs was uncanny. These inscriptions carried the same flowing geometry, the same interlocking arcs and mirrored angles. The film had drawn inspiration from ancient myths, yet the symbols here possessed an authenticity that seemed older than anything scholars had catalogued. Dawood exhaled slowly. "This was not on any satellite scans," he whispered. "No one mentioned structures in this region." Keanu felt the shard warming inside his pocket. He withdrew it, and the moment it entered the tower's glow, the symbols nearest to them responded. Their gentle luminescence brightened. A fine tremor ran through the tower, subtle but undeniable. The shard resonated with it, humming faintly in Keanu's palm. He rose to his feet. The tower's glow intensified around the area, reflecting the shard's coordinates. The symbols seemed to shift, not physically, but in a way that altered perception. The tower recognized the shard. That truth settled into Keanu with the weight of a scene written long before he arrived in Dubai. The celestial arc glowed with its usual evening radiance when Keanu returned, yet something in the lobby felt subtly rearranged, as if the building had adjusted its breathing. Guests drifted through pools of lamplight. Glasses clinked softly from the bar. A piano murmured a gentle, unhurried melody. But beneath it all ran an undercurrent of expectation, the sense that the hotel itself was quietly listening. Keanu walked in with dust from the desert still clinging to his boots, the memory of the beacon tower vivid in his mind. He moved toward the lobby bar, more out of instinct than thirst, aware of the prickling attention of the staff who had watched him leave before dawn. The bar lounged beneath a canopy of warm amber lights, their soft glow reflected on polished stone like constellations gathered for a drink. There, seated at the far end with an ease bordering on deliberate stillness, waited a stranger. The figure wore a tailored charcoal coat, its fabric absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. Their posture radiated a quiet assurance, as if they'd been expecting Keanu not just tonight, but across several nights no one had lived yet. When they glanced up, their gaze held a steady clarity, free of fan excitement or curiosity. It was the look of someone who'd already traveled through the conversation they were about to have. Keanu approached calmly. The stranger gestured to the empty seat beside them with a polite tilt of the hand. "I wondered how long it would take you to reach the beacon," the stranger said, voice low, neither accented nor accentless, as though it belonged to every place and none at all. Keanu sat, staying attentive. "You know about it." The stranger smiled, small, controlled, almost reverent. "I know it's awake." Keanu studied them carefully. "And you're saying it woke up because of me?" The stranger folded their hands, elbows resting lightly on the bar. "The tower sensed the shard the moment you touched it, but it didn't respond fully until you stepped into the desert. Some structures react to those who carry the right signature. You happen to be the one." The statement hung in the air like a page waiting to turn. Keanu remained still, absorbing each word without resistance. The shard in his pocket felt warm, as if acknowledging the stranger's explanation. "You delivered the shard," Keanu said. A faint nod. "Not personally, but I ensured it found you. The desert rarely reveals these things on its own. It had to be prompted." Keanu leaned back slightly, not defensive, simply grounded. "Why me?" The stranger's gaze softened with something almost like respect. "Because your arrival shifts attention. You draw eyes yet move quietly. The city noticed you, the desert noticed you, and the beacon recognized something mirrored in you. Call it attunement. Call it coincidence. Or call it the beginning of the role you were never meant to play on camera." The piano melody paused, a single breath between notes. The stranger hesitated only long enough for the bar's quiet atmosphere to settle around them, then leaned forward, folding their fingers together as if pulling invisible threads into a single line of truth. "The shard wasn't chosen at random," they began. "It is the final key to a mechanism older than the city, older than any mapped civilization. Something buried beneath this land long before Dubai was sand or skyline." Keanu stayed still, his focus absolute. The shard in his pocket seemed to respond, warming subtly as though attuned to the stranger's words. "What kind of mechanism?" he asked. The stranger's eyes glimmered with a difficult-to-name recognition, part reverence, part calculation, part something more ancient than either. "A system built by a culture that didn't see a divide between myth and machine," they said, "where symbols weren't mere stories but functional circuitry, where architecture wasn't just shelter but a vessel for intention." They paused, letting the thought stretch, letting the idea breathe. "The shard," the stranger continued, "is a component of their creation, a missing piece. For centuries it lay dormant with others of its kind, but this one survived intact. The rest were scattered, lost, melted into legend, or reclaimed by the desert. Without this shard, the mechanism beneath the dunes has remained asleep." Keanu felt the room shift around him. The bar's warm lights flickered gently, as if stirred by a breeze no one else felt. "And the beacon tower?" he asked. "It's a sentinel," the stranger said. A guardian structure. Think of it as the visible node of something far larger. Beneath it lies a network. Deep chambers, resonant corridors, and a central core that hasn't been active for thousands of years. When you approached with the shard, the beacon recognized the completion. It responded. It woke. And now the system beneath it waits for the next step. Keanu exhaled slowly, absorbing the impossible logic that felt strangely coherent. "Why give it to me?" he asked. "Why not activate it yourself?" The stranger smiled with a gentleness that startled him. "Because the shard doesn't respond to everyone. It responds to intention. You're someone who carries presence without demanding it, someone who listens before acting. The mechanism requires a human conduit, not a conqueror." A soft ripple of piano notes drifted from the far corner of the bar, as though the music itself was eavesdropping. "You said it's neither myth nor technology," Keanu said. "What does that mean?" The stranger's gaze held him firmly. "It means the creators understood that stories are engines. Belief is circuitry. Emotion shapes design. They built their machines as extensions of their narrative understanding. And they hid their greatest creation beneath a land that would one day be a crossroads of cultures, ambition, and light." The shard warmed again, as if chiming with agreement. Now that the beacon has awakened, dawn unspooled slowly across Dubai, washing the city in quiet gold. The skyline sharpened into a gallery of luminous silhouettes, each tower catching the first light like a blade raised in ritual acknowledgement. The celestial arc shimmered among them, its curved architecture gathering sunrise in its mirrored ribs. Inside, Keanu stood at the window of his suite, watching the world ignite one layer at a time. The shard rested in his palm. For a moment, he lifted it toward the rising sun. Its metallic surface didn't merely reflect the light. It absorbed it with a soft, trembling pulse, as though the day itself fed it. He wasn't an easily shaken man. Years of film sets, stunts, distant travel, strange encounters, none of that intimidated him. But this was different. This felt like the desert whispering a secret directly into his bloodstream. It felt like being invited into a story before knowing its plot. Below, the city moved with its usual morning rhythm, cars murmuring along brightening roads, early runners tracing arcs along the marina, drones gliding between towers delivering breakfast orders. No one looking up would sense anything unusual. No one would suspect that beneath the shimmering sand outside the city limits, something impossibly old had opened one cautious eye. Keanu replayed the stranger's words in his mind, a mechanism between myth and machinery, a network waiting to awaken, a beacon tower that pulsed like a slumbering heart, and him, of all people, holding the key that could stir it fully into life. He wasn't chosen because he was famous. The stranger had made that clear. He was chosen because the shard responded to the way he moved through the world. His calm wasn't performative. It was intrinsic. And apparently, whatever lay beneath the dunes required intention over force, clarity over ego. The choice pressed on him. Walk away, and the desert would reclaim its silence. The shard would dim. The beacon would sink back into its ancient sleep. Dubai would continue its rise into the future without ever knowing how close it came to being rewritten. Or step forward. Follow the stirrings beneath the sand. Acknowledge that some invitations once extended hum through the air until answered. His reflection in the window studied him back, its edges sharp with sunrise. He thought of the production crew who had flown in expecting a straightforward film project. He thought of the stranger, vanishing into the hotel corridors like a shadow returning to its owner. He thought of the desert humming underfoot, calling not with urgency but with patience. He closed his hand around the shard. The pulse intensified, the metal warming with almost human recognition. A soft knock sounded at his door, his security guide, punctual, ready to escort him wherever he chose to go. Keanu didn't move immediately. He let the moment stretch, balanced between two futures, the room filled with the subtle electricity of decision. Outside, the sun climbed higher.